What's up everybody, this is Ian the Fit Medic, and on this video we're going to be doing a full day of eating while I'm on shift. One thing I want to do to preface this entire video is mention the fact that I am reverse dieting. So my macros and my calories are going to actually be pretty restrictive, and I'm not in a cut. I'm coming out of a cut from prep. So I'm reverse dieting, but slowly to maintain a lean physique while rehabbing and building my basal metabolic rate back up to baseline. If you have any questions about what a reverse diet is, there's a whole nother video on that. Be sure to check that out. That's a whole nother subject, whole topic in itself. So let's start out by talking about what my calorie and macro goals were for this day of eating. So my protein was 180, my carbs were 100, and my fats were 35. And that brought me out to about 1450 calories. Once again, this is very restrictive. This is not how I eat forever, because I would waste away at 1450 calories. But this is just a slow, early step back in my reverse diet, getting back up to baseline for calorie intake. And so what I like to do with my meals, I like to break down the protein that I need to intake during the day, but just about evenly between each meal. And the reason behind this is because they found that there is a anabolic response to protein intake, but to a certain threshold. Once you cross the threshold, it's more of a light switch than an actual gradient. So once you cross this threshold, you get this anabolic response where your body's like, oh, let's repair some muscle, let's build some muscle, let's get bigger, stronger. But once you pass it, it's, doubling that protein amount isn't going to do anything more than the initial crossing the threshold. So think of it as like a light switch. So if you can break it down, cross that threshold as many times as possible, flipping that switch on as many times as possible, you're going to have that many more times that you have an anabolic response to this protein, opposed to just going ahead and eating your entire protein load in one or two meals, flipping that switch twice, but not having any further benefit past flipping that switch. So let's start it off. I found this trick during my prep was I could actually get a pretty tasty little caffeine shake by simply just taking coffee and throwing it in with protein shake as well as coffee ice cubes and blending it up. So that's my first meal of the day. I just call it protein coffee. It ends up tasting a lot like a frappe because it's blended, and I use a chocolate shake flavor. In this one, I'm using PE Science Select's chocolate cupcake flavor, and it ends up tasting fantastic. And the macros really break down simply to just the scoop of protein. So it's 120 calories, proteins are 24, carbs are 1, and fats are 2. I found that it's just a quick, easy meal, and I usually drink it on the way into work and kind of finish it off while I'm checking out my truck, heading to my first call or my first post. Meal number 2 is a bit of a new recipe I was experimenting with. It's a half cup of oats, a half cup of fat-free milk that I let sit overnight to absorb, kind of like overnight oats. And then I would go ahead and add cinnamon and then mix in as much fat-free Greek yogurt as possible to thicken it but not make it too thick. So I wanted it to be yogurt pudding type thickness, so I could eat it with a spoon, but I didn't want it to be watery. So to find that balance, I literally just put the whole thing on a scale with everything added in but the fat-free Greek yogurt, and I added in the Greek yogurt until I got the right consistency. It ended up being 170 grams of fat-free Greek yogurt, and all of this came out to be a total of 355 calories, protein being 32, carbs being 39, and fats being 4. Now for meal 3, I put together just a simple omelet. 8 ounces of egg whites, 28 grams of fat-free mozzarella cheese, and some vegetables that was already cut up. I didn't even count those vegetables. It was some mushrooms, onions. It was very little, mostly fibrous stuff. But a trick I found during prep for getting or adding in a little bit extra protein is fat-free mozzarella cheese. It's awesome because it's just essentially per 28 grams, I believe, is a quarter cup of fat-free mozzarella cheese, ends up being 9 grams of protein and no carbs, no fats. So it's a really easy way when you're in a very high protein diet to hit your protein limit without adding in fats or carbs. Plus, it tastes good. It's cheese. Now, don't get me wrong, by no means is it as tasty as full-fat cheese, but I mean, it's not bad. And with that as well, I'm also having some popcorn. To be honest, I kind of estimated the macros on this because I made it at home. And the way I do this is pop it on the stove. I add a touch of olive oil, mostly so the seasonings stick, and then I just throw in salt, garlic, onion powder, and basil. It's a weird combination, but it's so good. So I have a bag of that, and it's about a 10 grams of carbs with a little bit of oil, so we'll give it 1 gram of fat. So this whole meal ends up coming out to be a total of 212 calories, and that's 34 grams of protein, 10 grams of carbs, and 1 gram of fat. Meal number 4 is a meal I essentially lived off of during my last contest prep. It's real simple, so it's just tuna fish. A can of tuna mixed with, in this case, I used sriracha mayo. I used 2 tablespoons. I just like the taste of sriracha mayo versus standard mayo. If you have to restrict your fat, which I did during prep, what I would do is substitute with Dijon mustard, and you use it to just essentially make it swallowable because tuna in water, by the way, not tuna in oil, is very dry by itself. So if you don't have the fats to mix in with it, you got to mix something else in, so that's mustard. I was in prep when I really was low on fats or didn't have the available fats to mix in there. I would pretty much just only put mayo and hot sauce or sriracha in there, and it wasn't great, but it was edible. Now, if you can add fats in, you want to add your mayos, your sriracha mayo in my case. It tastes great. It's a really great protein source. Now, the carb I like to add in with my tuna fish is just rice cakes, because you can throw it on the rice cake and eat it kind of in like a half sandwich kind of form. So this whole thing ends up being a total of 406 calories, and that's 29 grams of protein, 23 grams of carbs, and 22 grams of fat. As you can see, this is my highest fat source so far for the day. And so with the timing of this meal, it's about when I want to start adding some more caffeine into my system to finish out the shift. And so you can see I'm drinking my favorite energy drink, which I learned about during my last contest prep. A friend of mine who's a bikini competitor, she suggested these Bang energy drinks to me, and I was living off them in prep. They're really good, and the tea line that they have now is also very good. That's what I'm drinking right now. And this energy drink too is like double the caffeine of a standard energy drink. It's 300 milligrams of caffeine opposed to like a Monster, which is 150. So it's great. It's pretty much pre-workout, but you don't really get jittery with it. It just gives you a good boost of energy. I really like it. Also has creatine and branched chain amino acids in there. Amino acids is one of the biggest supplements I take during prep to limit the amount of muscle loss I have. So that's pretty simple. Just some rice cakes with tuna fish on top, and an energy drink. Now for meal 5 to meal 6, it's essentially the same thing. I have 10 ounces of chicken with 160 grams of white potatoes, and then that's just split between 2 meals. So it ends up being 5 ounces of chicken with 80 grams of potatoes. The total between those 2 meals is 394 calories, 61 grams of protein, 28 grams of carbs, and 6 grams of fat. So as you can see, it's just a very protein-heavy meal. And once again, when I split it in half, it's to get that light switch effect. I hit 30 grams of protein halfway through. No reason I can't split it up, so it's 30 and 30, opposed to eating all 61 grams of protein at one sitting, getting a light switch flipped one time opposed to 2 times. And one thing I also wanted to note in this full day of eating is I treated myself to just a bag of the Harvest Cheddar Sun Chips. In prep, this never would have happened because, it's very restricted. It was very, very meticulous, and there was very little flexibility for something like this. And while I am regimented post-season and off-season and doing this reverse diet, there's no reason I can't live a little, I can't enjoy myself. So I wanted a bag of chips. I got a bag of chips. Now that's 210 calories, and that's 3 grams of protein, 28 grams of carbs, and 9 grams of fat. So now for my final numbers. The full day of eating, I ate a total of 1,677 calories, which is 182 grams of protein, 129 grams of carbs, and 43 fats. Without the bag of chips, if this was, let's say, a flawless day where I had no treats, no deviation, nothing like that, it would have been 1,467 calories with 179 grams of protein, 101 grams of carbs, and 34 grams of fat. That would have hit my macros just about perfect. Once again, I can afford a bag of chips. It's not a big deal at the end of the day. There's no reason to guilt yourself or feel shameful for having a bag of chips off season. To be fair, it's harder for me to have a bag of chips right after the prep just because my basal metabolic rate hasn't really risen yet. As it comes up, I'll have even more flexibility to kind of go ahead and have a bag of chips, because I'll have more room in my caloric maintenance level. So that was a full day of eating. Keep up the grind and see you on the next one.